Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So we do have some Netflix Avatar news to talk about. There is a new promo clip that they put out, 43 seconds long. Plus we also, of course, have the initial impressions from quite a few people to kind of go over. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'll just try and give a broad overview from what I have seen and a couple of other little bits as well. So let's start with the promo here, some new footage. This is a Fire Nation focused promo video with a decent amount of new shots. I'm not going to go crazy in depth on the screenshot analysis here. I think I only have like 5 screenshots from this one, but it does tell us, I think, a little bit about what is the Ozai content going to be that really wasn't here in the original, but that is going to be here. And to a certain degree, what's the Azula stuff maybe going to be? So, Ozai's giving a speech. Who's he talking to? I've asked this question in a few of the other Ozai clips. It turns out, it seems like this group of Fire Nation kind of young rebels or something like that. Are they assassins? I'm guessing it might just be people like protesting, fighting against like, why is the Fire Nation expanding? Why are we attacking the other nations? Why has this war been going on for so long? It makes sense that some people would see through that and want to oppose it. And so they confront Ozai, but the guards come out and he is left to deal with them. So this is why he's trying to explain like his era of peace, what he's trying to do with the Fire Nation. And obviously they don't agree. And then he's going to punish them. Along the way, you also see this kind of mural kind of portrait of Ozai, which is kind of cool. Azula does seem to be right next to him as he's about to dole out this punishment. So is he going to kill them or burn them with fire? We will have to wait and see. But it gives you a sense for like, okay, so that's some of the stuff we're going to be dealing with Ozai, kind of dealing with a little bit of Fire Nation politics. Is there any opposition to continuing the war? Looks like there's at least a little bit, because obviously his behavior, he's going to be around Azula quite a bit, has to inform what she's planning to do. She wants to prove herself, and we'll see that in just a second. We do get a shot of the fire sages for one of the first times, because otherwise, like, the only stuff from this that we've really seen is just Crescent Island itself. Now we actually head in and we see some of the sages here. One of them firebends at Aang. He blocks. So it'll be interesting to see, because this is obviously where the Roku stuff is going to happen, and they haven't shown, I think, a lot from this episode, as far as I'm aware anyway. So just nice to get a quick look at that. Then the thing that I think a lot of people have been discussing, and that is this Azula shot. It's very quick, just we immediately jump into this cut, and is Azula defending? Is she attacking? I went through it frame by frame a few times. Just before this, like the frame just before this, I don't think the fire is there, and then it sort of activates and she kind of swipes like this. I think this is her firebending, or it's some weird, or maybe she's holding something that is on fire. But I don't think this really is as like crazy as people make it out to be in terms of like, oh, what about the blue fire? I think the blue fire is in. I think it's been mentioned by the actress who plays Azula in interviews that like Azula has blue fire. I'm guessing that this is Azula in doing training. And I think the fact that we've seen her using a bow and arrow, we have the confirmation from one of the promo images the other day that she is going to use lightning at some point. Blue fire probably is going to come into play. What is Azula's arc this book? I assume part of it is going to be her maybe just developing her skills. So maybe she starts off the book and maybe she does only have normal fire, but she trains to try and come across as amazing as possible to her father, and this is where she learns blue fire. We might see that actually happen on screen. Maybe it's just they're going to do it slightly differently here, where she only uses the blue fire when she pushes really hard and really wants to do some powerful moves. Might lightning be something that comes into play right towards the end, highlighting that she's leveled up even more? Just because that would sort of make sense to get across that kind of perfectionist idea. She constantly feels that she has to like evolve her skill set, and so that's why we maybe see those extra skills kind of get added to. That's just some speculation, but yeah. I wouldn't be super worried about what they're going to do with Azula's abilities. It's going to be, I think, as we know it. They know not to make weird changes like that. I think that's pretty clear. Then this shot's actually quite interesting. So this is obviously Iroh, we'll start with Iroh, in his, I guess, Dragon of the West kind of military attire. Now, obviously, this would suggest it's in around Northern Water Tribe area of the show. I'm assuming this maybe suggests that, as expected from the original, Iroh goes with Zhao to the north. That Zhao gets him on board. It makes me wonder, like, how exactly is the Zuko potentially gets assassinated or put out of the way so that Iroh would go with Zhao like that? Because I'm guessing the same thing, like Zuko has to go undercover on Zhao's ship, just basically with Iroh to get to the Northern Water Tribe. So they might have to do some slight changes around to make that happen, or maybe they just have someone else try and assassinate Zuko rather than the pirates like in the original. This, I think, I'm guessing, is Zuko in his kind of ninja outfit, infiltrating the Northern Water Tribe. It could be from a slightly different shot, but that's my take on it right now. But I think that's most all there really is to say about the shots from this new trailer. Just a little bit of, I think, extra insight into what mainly I think Ozai and Azula are going to be up to, which is, I think, a decent look inside. Then we have what seems to be the reveal of the runtimes for each of the 8 episodes of the show. So you can see here, longest episode is going to be the first episode, 61 minutes. The shortest episode is going to be episode 7 at 44 minutes. But otherwise, it seems like the average is basically just over 50 minutes. Now, I know it had always said with this show that they're going to be 8-hour-long episodes, and I never took that to mean literally every single one was going to be 60 minutes. I think there was always going to be a variety of the timings of the episodes, just because there is such a difference in what each episode's going to be about. Like, for example, the first 2 episodes. The first episode, as far as we're aware from the initial impressions, is episode 1, 2, 3, and a pretty long, by all accounts, Sozin's Comet kind of prelude into the action type sequence when it comes to the Air Nomad genocide. So effectively 4 chunks of content make up the first episode, versus the second episode, as far as we're aware, is only based on 104 and maybe some extended material stuff. It might bring in some of, like, 205 Avatar Day, but nowhere near as much like original source material content. So how much original stuff is here? Is it just that they can only extend the episode so far? How much is going on here? Especially like when we have stuff like, say, the Azula and Ozai plots that we don't really know much about. It makes sense where this one's going to be packed right to the limit of what they can do. Some of the other episodes are going to come up a little bit shorter compared to maybe what they could theoretically do. The only maybe concern here is with perhaps some of these smaller episodes, like episode 2 and 7, is that if these times include like credits and stuff like that, and on Netflix at times those credits can be quite long with all the multiple language kind of credits at the end. Like, are you taking off like maybe 5-6 minutes, maybe upwards getting closer to 10 minutes? That could make some of these episodes feel relatively short if it has effectively these times minus maybe 5 minutes. But still, I think this is in line with what we probably were expecting, and it doesn't immediately give me any sort of cause for concern, really. Then we get into the initial impressions. Now, I'm just going to use this article here from What's on Netflix, since they seem to have sort of aggregated at least a few of the impressions together. They choose about 9, is it 8 or 9 in this article, different impressions, but I've seen maybe over the course of the day, like 30 something different people post some sort of a basic review or just initial impressions. I don't quite agree perhaps with the idea that the general perception is that it would be a mixed response. I would frame it as like it's mostly positive, like it's at the very least leaning positive. Saying mixed to me implies that there's an even blend of positive kind of and then negative reviews, whereas I think there's been a relatively small amount of properly negative reviews. There's definitely been quite a few like it's good but there's some flaws type things, as the kind of like explaining like maybe an 8 or like 7.5 out of 10 type thing, and then there's been some this is really really good, the mega positive responses. And just talking about this a little bit on Twitter, it seems like that's what most people's perception is, kind of looking around the place, and what they've found is that it definitely leans positive. And I think saying it's mixed obviously makes sense when you maybe frame it like this article does, where you have like, okay, they basically kind of do it themselves. Here's 3 very positive reviews, here's kind of 3 middle of the road reviews, and then here's 3 negative reviews. But even then, I would say they almost have it as like 5, 6 positive reviews and then 3 negative ones. So like there's still a skew even within this article towards positive, I would say. And I think in terms of the response that we maybe want to see for this, once it wasn't just all negative, I think that was always going to be a success to a certain degree. Like, I don't think anyone actually expected that this show would ever go the way of the Last Airbender movie. And I just don't think that was ever possible. So the fact that I think there's even the slightest of skew, and it actually seems, I think, quite heavier towards positive than I'm maybe even presenting here, that to me comes across as good. Because I think if it really was bad and had all these flaws, I think more of the reviews would be leaning in the direction of like, oh, I see some problems, because of just how sort of summation reviews can kind of be, of just trying to give your general thoughts on something. It can tend to go towards extremes, and the fact that there's only a couple of very negative reviews, I think you should look at that as being pretty positive. So they just highlight the Avatarist, of course, who gives a very positive review here. Mike Thomas gives a pretty positive review here. Kayla Williams from Night Edge Media gives a positive review. Then we get towards the more sort of like good, but maybe some slight issues kind of beginning to come into play here with some of these ones here. You know, there are definitely some issues, but it's better than the controversies would have you think. You know, some of the more negative ones maybe getting into like, it looks beautiful, but it isn't a patch on the original. I didn't enjoy this one. Okay. Life and color that was once in the original is non-existent in this one. Mischaracterization present. VFX looks unfinished. Bending looks great. Visuals are solid, but it's a mixed bag of an adaptation. Too much exposition, poor writing, horrible pacing. Antoine Vandelay gave this as his review, 9 out of 10. Pretty positive, very, very positive actually. So, you know, there's definitely groups of opinions out there, but I think from what I've seen, it's certainly been like 70-30 in terms of positive negative. That there's been, for every negative I've seen, I've probably seen 2 to 3 positive reviews. Now ultimately I don't need the overall reception to be positive, just because it's very hard to judge your own sort of like viewing criteria versus other people's, especially when not everyone is giving like details in their kind of initial impressions. But from what I've seen, it just seems like this is probably one of the best ones in terms of just the good statement of like pretty decent so far. And this is coming from someone who is a big fan. There are issues, but it's better than the controversies will have you think. If you're open to it, you'll have fun, but if you've already made up your mind, you'll hate it. So I definitely view that as basically the idea of there's probably stuff in the show that if you want to, you can pick it apart and make it come across as being something that has a lot of flaws. But if you go in with, you know, open to changes, open to it being very different, you're going to have some fun. And I think that's probably one of the more kind of like reasonable opinions out there in terms of just like, hey, this person hasn't gotten lost in the hype or the negativity, and has a decent perception on kind of, I think, what's going on. And I think I've seen quite a few things like maybe this one and like this one. I think I've seen like quite a few other ones that are along those lines of just kind of mostly positive, but I have a criticism here or there, which I think is probably where most people are probably going to be at on this when it comes out. Like, if I was to predict a kind of maybe average review rating for this, I'm probably at the moment maybe looking like I think it's definitely in the sort of 7 to 8 kind of out of 10 kind of channel, is where I would view like where probably the average is in terms of a review score right now. But again, this is just the first episode. And you may be asked the question with a show like this. The first episode, given that like the first 3 episodes you expect to be relatively accurately adapted, just because how many changes can they really have? Though a few people have been maybe talking about there might be a few twists and turns that you don't expect. But I think there will be a bit of a difference between, say, like the adaptation of this, which I think is going to be mostly pretty faithful, compared to, I think a lot of the middle episodes are going to come across quite differently than the original. And then I assume the finale will be getting back more towards very familiar territory. But that's just that. So, yeah, I still think the main takeaway probably just has to be watch the show yourself, form your opinion there. It's nice to see what people have to say about it ahead of time, just to get a little bit of a kind of insight. But don't stress too much about what's kind of coming out here. Definitely look yourself if you want to. If you want to stay away from it, obviously very much do that. But, you know, we're 6 days away. I think we all know where we're at, and I don't think any individual review is going to kind of change our fundamental excitement level this close to release. Final piece of news is the one non-Netflix Avatar piece of news, and that is just the next Braving the Elements podcast, so the official Avatar podcast. They've put up the premiere on YouTube for the next episode, highlighting the next episode of the podcast is going to be the FC Yee and Nancy Wu interview episode. So that means, of course, author for the first 4 Avatar novels and the audiobook narrator. So cool concept for a interview here. Is there going to be new information? I don't really know, but I think it could still be one of the more interesting podcast topics. So we'll see if there's anything to kind of cover in this. At times, FC Yee maybe hasn't been given maybe the best answers to kind of interview questions. So we'll see what type of form it actually takes. But you know, I'm definitely going to listen to this one, and I think it's cool that it's happening now. And yeah, it'll be the day before, well, the YouTube stuff will go up the day before Netflix Avatar, but I think the podcast should just be out like even earlier in the week, if I remember correctly, when they upload the podcasts. But yeah, just to be aware of that. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the new Fire Nation clip that we got with some Fire Nation focused stuff, Ozai, Azula. Runtimes we now seem to have here. They definitely line up with what I would expect. And then what are your thoughts on what you have seen from the early reviews? Do you agree with some of these articles that are out there saying that it is mixed, or do you agree with me where what you've seen is leaning a little bit more into positive direction? And then what do you make of what has been said in the initial impressions also? But yeah, let me know below. But otherwise, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.